Qiwu Qian in spring, boating on Ruoye Creek, brooding on thoughts that have no resolution. I give no thought to where we're drifting. An evening breeze sends the boat onward, following the drift of fallen flowers on the creek. At nightfall, we turn into the western gorge as the southern dipper shines between the hills. Mist spreads above the sandy shore. The moon sets behind us in the trees. Thinking of how uncertain our lives have grown, I wish I were that old man with his fishing pole. So we have a poem here by Qiwu Qian, not a first-rate figure as far as I know. He is a high-tongue poet. We've already encountered him in a previous poem, not as a writer, but as a receiver of a poem by Wang Wei, and that was a poem in which Qiwu Qian had failed at the examinations. Later on he succeeded, but only one of his poems appears in this anthology, which is this one. Now, what is the topic of the poem? This is a landscape, a natural scenery poem, which describes the sights while boating a river. It's set in spring, so we have some indications of the season in the flowers that appear, but not too many. Its main focus, as I said, is in describing the sights that are enjoyed by the poetic persona from his boat of the landscape. There is also an element which makes its presence at the beginning and at the end of the poem. You could say that it's sandwiching the natural landscape description, which is the unease, the broodiness of the thoughts of the poet, which we might imagine are thoughts about his responsibilities in office, his ambitions, his plans, his political responsibilities as a scholar official. So there is a slight element of sadness, of a desire to withdraw from the world, and this enjoyment, this little boating trip down the Ruoye Creek acts as a way of temporarily forgetting the responsibilities and stresses and worries of office. Let's analyze the different parts of the poem. I'd say the poem is divided into three distinct parts. The first couplet introduces us to the poem, and uncharacteristically, instead of introducing us the poem by saying, I decided to go with my friends for an outing, it starts with the preoccupations of Qiwu Qian. Brooding on thoughts that have no resolution, I give no thought to where we're drifting. Instead of apparently enjoying the boating trip, Qiwu Qian is so obsessed with problems that, he doesn't even notice the direction in which the boat is drifting. In the main part of the poem, Qiwu Qian does seem to be able to refocus his attention, and he describes the sights very well. In the first couplet, we have a little breeze and fallen flowers over the water. In the next couplet, it's late, it's nightfall, and we have entering a gorge, so big mountains next on both sides of the water, and stars in heaven. The southern dipper shines between the hills. So visual images, like the fallen flowers in the previous couplet were. And the last of these couplets shows us mist spreading over the sandy shore and the moon setting behind in the trees. So again, visual images. We do get the feeling that in this last couplet, we're moving away from the water into the land, as if the boating trip is over and as if the boat is going to land in the sandy shore, and their companions of the scholar official are going to go back to their lodgings for the night. The poem concludes on a very similar note as it started, on the problems, on the worries that are assailing Qiwu Qian. Thinking of how uncertain our lives have grown, I wish I were that old man with his fishing pole. Why have our lives grown uncertain? I have no specific detail on this. If I had the date of the poem, I might be able to speculate that these problems that are torturing Qiwu Qian's mind might be related to the chaos that followed the Anlushan rebellion. If this poem was written after 755, 756, otherwise it might refer to, the personal ups and downs in the search for office and position of a scholar official that Qiwu Qian might have experienced. I wish I were that old man with his fishing pole. So the poem finishes in this bucolic note that is already present in other poems. In his friend Wang Wei's, we had a similar ending when we read the poem about, what was it? I think it was the Farmers on the Way River one that finished with the poetic persona wanting to lead the life of the farmers, of the people in the countryside. And the life at ease of fishing makes its presence in the previous poem we read. Qiwu Wei, I think, talks about the recluse he was looking for, trailing a hook in the autumn river. Wang Wei, again, in Green Creek, also finished with the idea of resting in a bowdler and fishing. So being a fisherman for pleasure is a very good symbol for the retired life of the scholar. It's one of the activities that the retired scholar official, would dabble in his free time. But it also connects with the Taoist image, which I think we've talked about. There is a story in the Qizu story poem in which Chu Yuan, the scholar official who is traumatized at not having his merit recognized by the ruler and at being exiled, finds a fisherman and talks with him. And the fisherman gives him some very commonsensical advice, like when times are good, serve in office. When times are bad, retire and enjoy life. So maybe a bit of that image is here. Qiwu Qian wants to be the old man with his fishing pole and not be occupied by the worries of office. Short poem. I think it creates a juxtaposition of interesting images for describing the views from the creek. And it's okay. I would say it's the most interesting one I've read in the book. But it's a nice series of images, and we get that mystery on what is so worrying, what is so occupying the thoughts of Qiwu Qian as to, even if only temporarily, block out his appreciation of a beautiful spring landscape in a river. And that will be all for today, people. Tomorrow we'll continue with yet another different poet and a different poem.